For the track drivers, the grip drivers, and the drifters, the Nissan Silvia has earned its place as one of the most iconic and beloved vehicles in automotive history. Known for its sleek design, affordable performance, and extensive presence in motorsports, especially in drifting, the Silvia has left a lasting legacy. Over its generations, it evolved from the compact luxury car to a sports car revered for driving enthusiasts all around the world. Let's dive into the history of the Nissan Silvia, from its debut in 1964 to its final iteration in 2002, and explore its different variations, special editions, and the motorsports influence it's had over the years. Where it all began, the first generation. The first Nissan Silvia, the S10, debuted in 1964. Designed as a company luxury sports coupe, the S10 showcased the early direction Nissan would take with its sports cars designs. With its 1.6-liter engine, the S10 was a stylish and affordable alternative to European sports cars of the time. The S10 would come with a 1.6-liter inline-4 engine paired with a 4-speed manual transmission, with the earlier Silvia featuring a classic design with a long hood, short rear deck, and aggressive stance, reflecting its inspiration from the American muscle car scene. The S10 used a front independent strut and rear leaf spring suspension setup, prioritizing comfort rather than outright performance. And so the story continues. The S110 was introduced in 1975 and marked the departure from the S10's luxury styling. It featured more angular, aggressive styling with improved performance features and a turbocharged engine option that came with it as well. There were several engines and engine variants that it came with, including the CA18E, which is a 1.8-liter inline-4, the FJ20E, a 2-liter inline-4, along with a turbocharged option of another variant of the CA, which would be the CA18ET. The S110's angular design was a reflection of the era's automotive trends, featuring boxier lines and a more aggressive stance. It also featured a front independent strut and a rear semi-trailing arm suspension configuration for better handling compared to its predecessor. The S12 Silvia, I would like to say the unloved Silvia, is the third generation and was a turning point for the model, introducing more modern styling and technology. Released in 1983, the S12 came in both coupe and hatchback body styles, appealing to a wider range of buyers. The S12 featured several engine choices, including the naturally aspirated CA18E, the turbocharged CA18ET, and the more powerful FJ20ET. The specialist and most rarest of the S12 Silvia was the Silvia Grand Prix, a rare limited edition model. The Grand Prix featured a wide-body kit and special decals reflecting a Raleigh-inspired design, and only around 50 units were ever produced. So this is a Raleigh S12. There was a Raleigh Silvia. But that was for the street. There was also a Raleigh variant that was track ready, a true race car for the track, which was the S12 Silvia RV S12. And this was a Raleigh spec Silvia powered by the VG30E V6 engine, and it competed in motorsports like Safari Rally, and it achieved pretty good success as well. And now we move faster pace into the 90s from the 80s with the S13 Silvia, or Nissan 240SX in America, and Nissan 200SX in Europe and other countries. The S13 will introduce a more upscale but more sporty suspension tuning. Introduced in 1989, it marked the beginning of an even more sporty and more transition from 80s to 90s focused Silvia. The S13 would utilize a fully independent multi-link suspension, both front and rear. The front came with McPherson strut suspension, and the rear came with multi-link independent suspension. You had different body styles such as the fastback, which was the most popular, which most people would call a hatchback, but it was a fastback, and there is a little bit of a difference. You had the coupe version, or what is known in the Silvia world or Nissan world as the notchback, which had a slightly stiffer chassis, but it was less common. And you had a convertible that wasn't introduced actually until 1992, and there was no convertible from 1989 to 1991. In the S13s, you would have a choice in America from a KA24E only from 1989 to 1990, which made 140 horsepower and 152 pounds of torque. From 1991 to 1992, the S13s could be had with a KA24DE dual overhead cam, which would bump the power from 140 to 155 horsepower and from 152 pounds of torque to 160 pounds of torque. In Japan, the S13 180SX, which is what it was called in Japan, would come with either a CA18DET from 1988 to 1991, which made 167 horsepower and 166 pounds of torque, or from 1991 to 1994, because the model years are different in Japan versus America, would come in the S13, and that made 202 horsepower and 203 pounds of torque. Back in America, you had the base model, the SE, and the XE. The SE model is really the model that most people would want to start off with, and that SE stands for Sports Edition, and it added sportier features like alloy wheels, a rear wiper, and sometimes a limited slip differential, but a LSD was not standard. The rarest version in America would probably be a 1994 Nissan 240SX LE convertible, and there was only a few thousand made in the final year model, and they were fully loaded luxury spec, and the convertible only available or came available from 1992 to 1994 and was made in small numbers by ASC in California. The S13 would start a revolution of drifters and younger people as well as older getting into the art of drifting into the culture. This would start a revolution of people who fell in love with Silvias and in America, Nissan 240SXs, and would push drifting to an astronomical level. Continuing the world dominance and rage would come along the S14 Silvia. Introduced in 1993, this would mark the beginning of a more mature and performance-focused era for the Silvia name. Gone were the flip lights of the cool late 80s and early 90s, moving into a more sophisticated and sleek and aerodynamic design featuring some qualities and aesthetics from the bigger brother Nissan R33 Skyline. The car featured a more aggressive and refined design and further solidified the model's reputation in motorsports, grip driving, and drifting. In America, we would get the K24DE, a 2.4-liter inline-4 that carried over from the S13, but now was dual overhead cam and also gained a couple of pounds of torque and horsepower. Other things were refined inside of the motor as well, but while we were playing with a big 4-cylinder in America, in Japan you would have two options, which would be a SR20DE, a naturally aspirated or all-motor 2-liter inline 4-cylinder engine, or you would have a SR20DET, which was the turbocharged version of the SR20, delivering significantly more horsepower. Now there's many variations of the SR20DET throughout Japan and its history in its home country. The SR20DET was from 1991 to 2002, and there were many variants And you had some famous variants like the early red tops from 1991 to 1994, which made 202 horsepower and 203 pounds of torque. And then you had the black top in the previous generation S13 that made the same as the red top. And then from 1995 to 1998, the SR20 would be bumped up to 217 horsepower at 6,000 RPM and 203 pounds of torque at 4,800 RPMs. The most special editions, or the specialist edition you can get, which I think everybody drools over, is the Nismo 270R, a limited edition performance-tuned Silvia producing 270 horsepower, hence the name, with only 50 units being produced, featuring custom Nismo parts like a front-mounted intercooler, heavy-duty clutch, and a two-way limited slip differential. Don't forget the company Alltech, better remember their name, called the Alltech version K's MF-T, which would be another Alltech special, and this model featured more premium styling and performance enhancements, including a tuned SR20 DET engine. The S14 would utilize a full independent multi-link suspension, now not just in the rear, but in the front and rear, upgrading from the S13, which drastically improved handling and stability compared to the S13 previous model. Some would say the holy grail of all Silvias, the youngest of them all, the wild kid, Billy the Kid of Silvias, the final generation, the S15. From 1999 to 2002, the S15 was launched in 1999 and became a symbol of Nissan's commitment to performance. The S15 had an even more refined and aggressive design, and it is perhaps the most well-known generation among enthusiasts, especially in motorsports and drifting. You could also thank Fast and Furious for making this car super duper famous in best motoring videos and wild style Japanese drivers, showing off the loudness of the motor, the performance of the car, and the agility and playfulness that this chassis has to offer. This engine came with the SR20 DET, continuing this SR20 in Japan, with a highly revered turbocharged inline-4 that was tweaked even more. The tuning potential of the SR20 is very high, with some stock examples going close to 400 horsepower. A naturally aspirated SR20 DE would also come with it as well for lower trims, and the SR20 DET engine was the most popular in markets like Japan and Australia, while some regions received naturally aspirated versions as well. There were numerous editions of S15 special editions. The Spec R would be the highest performance version of the S15, equipped with a more powerful SR20 DET engine, 6-speed manual transmission, and upgraded suspension components, and many other things. Right under that, the Spec S would be a more affordable variant that retained the SR20DE all-motor version, but with a fewer performance-oriented features. There was also an Alltech version, which was a luxury version of the S15 developed by Alltech, featuring an upgraded interior with premium materials along with the SR20 DET engine for enhanced power. The super duper rare version would be a Super Drift Spec R, which Nissan produced special versions of the S15 tailored specifically for drifting competitions. The S15 would maintain its multi-link suspension setup, but with further refinements to its chassis and handling characteristics. A lighter frame and better suspension geometry made the S15 an ideal performer and platform for drifting in motorsports. The evolution of the Silvia was not an easy one, and not always one that everyone favored. But next time you're drifting and sliding, bouncing the rev limiter off of a SR20 DET, or trucking down the road in a KA24, just remember, the Silvia will never die.